Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode where we're talking more about the Akashic Records. As I'm going through and learning these different modalities where you can connect to different spiritual realms or the divine source energy, whatever you kind of resonate with there, as I'm going through and learning these different modalities, I'm going to link books that I am reading, have read, what I learned, how they helped me, and honestly, I'm just going to give a very just transparent book review of if your preferred way of learning maybe a different modality or learning different things is through reading, this is the episode for you. So this book is one of the books that's very highly talked about in the Akashic Records world. It's by Howe. It's just called How to Read the Akashic Records, Accessing the Archive of the Soul and Its Journey. And honestly, you guys, I was hooked at the beginning. This is how it opens. She says, I did not have a near-death experience. It's more like I discovered near-death spirituality for a period of years. The situation was grim and I couldn't understand why. I had done everything right, had been a good girl, gone to college, studied hard, gotten good grades. I had a good job, a nice apartment. I had what looked like a fine life. I had everything I thought I wanted and I was miserable. Through sheer effort, I had been able to achieve what I had set out to do, but all my accomplishments couldn't quiet the scream echoing up from a canyon in my soul. That is exactly how I was before I began this spiritual journey, path to spiritual enlightenment, spiritual healing work, all of the things. I had all these things that the world told me that I had to have. I got married in my 20s. Obviously, I've been married and divorced now. I had the house, the career, the degrees, the job. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I had the things, and I was so miserable. And then I felt guilty that I was miserable because I was like, I've had so many opportunities that people would love to have, and now I have them and I'm not grateful. What is wrong with me? All the emotions. And so she had me right off the bat. I was like, ooh, girlfriend, I already relate to your story. Tell me more. So she goes on, she tells her, story of how she just went through different practices of being a shamanic healer, doing tarot readings, all these different things before she finally found the Akashic Records. And she does a lot of really cool things in this book. So in this book, Linda Howe actually has a 2-day course that you can take in person where she teaches you how to access your own Akashic Records and then how to do readings for others. And she essentially took that 2-day course content and put it into this book, which I think is so cool because there's so many amazing spiritual teachers that are just like, hey, you want to know everything that I teach? Literally, you can buy it for $15 on Amazon. And it's definitely a book where you have to spend some time going through it. I had to read it over a couple of days because she does a lot of practical application. So she actually shares her pathway prayer as to how to tap into the Akashic Records, how she got her pathway prayer. She does her opening and closing prayers, and she gives you a ton of exercises of different things you can try within the Akashic Records. And I have not seen very many people offer up their opening and closing prayers. Those are generally pretty kind of private prayers, but those prayers ultimately are what connect you to the Akashic Records. So she talks about how to use this book. She has an opening meditation. Most people who practice that work in the Akashic Records recommend you do an opening meditation or a grounding meditation prior to doing your opening prayer. Then once you do your opening prayer, that opening prayer is actually what connects you into the Akashic Records and allows you to be able to kind of go through your Akashic library. So she has 2 different parts to this book. The first part is how to read the Akashic Records, and she goes into an introduction of what the Akashic Records are. And then she goes into talking about, this is actually the only person that I've ever explained it with this concept, which I think makes so much sense. She basically explains that there's these people called the Lords of the Records, and the Lords of the Records are the people, not people, they're like angelic beings, if you will, and they're making sure that everybody who's tapping into the Akashic Records, they're getting the information that they need for that moment. So obviously the Akashic Records are, these soul books of everything that has transpired in your soul, in your business, in your career, in your personal life, in your relationships, everything. And it's so much information that if we got too much or not the right pieces at the wrong time, that it could do more harm than good. So there's these lords of the records that are actually the ones kind of facilitating that and making sure that we're getting the right downloads from the Akashic records for that time in our life, which I think is really cool, that there's always somebody that's kind of making sure that everything done in the records is done to the highest good of all those involved, and that you can't really get yourself into a bad situation by tapping into the Akashic records once you've learned how. Okay, so from there, she talks about how do people access the Akashic records, and then she goes into guidelines and ground rules for reading the Akashic records. These I think are really good. So she has some guidelines for reading the Akashic records, and I think they're pretty reasonable. Don't consume drugs or alcohol for at least 24 hours before opening the records. You obviously want to go in with a clean mind, clear heart, pure soul, all those things. This is not the first time I've heard this, but it's like the best definition of why. So you're supposed to use your current legal name when opening your records. So since the records are your soul book, whenever I go in, I'm supposed to access the records of Madison Worth Daniels. That's my full legal name. That's how I'm known in the Akashic records. So if I go in and I access that record, I'm going to get a lot more accurate reading than if I just go in and say I want to access Madison's records. Then it says be responsible for your time in the records. Ground yourself after each reading. Normally so I do a lot of my readings walking. Like if I do readings on myself, I'll go for a walk. I'll normally do my grounding meditation before I leave. Then I'll go on a walk and I'll say my opening prayer to connect to the records. And then I'll just kind of do my time in the Akashic records a lot of times when I'm on my walk. And then towards the end of the walk, I'll close the records and then I'll just, finish out my walk from there. That personally works really well for me. If I'm not doing that, if I'm doing it stationary, a lot of times I'll get up afterwards and like make food or go for a walk or something like that, just to kind of like shuffle out of that energy into like the next, if that makes sense. Okay, next thing, when combining the Akashic records with any other system, always honor both methods. So I personally haven't done that. I would love to. I know some people incorporate tarot into their Akashic records readings. I personally have not done that yet, but I would like to do that in the future and be able to kind of like intertwine different modalities to paint a larger picture or a more clear answer. So then she goes into, of course, guidelines for opening the Akashic records for others, because this book is part 1, how to open your Akashic records and read them, and part 2, how to open others' Akashic records and read them. And so first thing, before opening another person's Akashic records, make sure you get their permission. So of course you shouldn't go out reading somebody's soul book that doesn't know that you're in there or hasn't given you permission. Maintain the strictest confidentiality, of course, like any other spiritual reading. Present all the information you get as positively, kindly, and respectfully as possible. Do not open the records up for anybody under the age of 18. And then she has in here a recommendation for the first 30 days, which is, I did way more than 30 days whenever I first started tapping into the Akashic records. That was my only source of kind of like divine connection. And I was like just tapping into the records every single day just to get used to what it looked like, how I could connect, what I could learn in there, all the different things. So yeah, super, super interesting. So then it goes into the pathway prayer process, and she goes through how you do the pathway prayer, which is the prayer that allows you to access the records. And she gives you like her whole prayer in here. It's so cool. And then she also goes through and gives you her closing prayer, and then she has one page where she has like opening and closing prayer. So if you wanted to use hers, you could literally just like have this page open, use the opening prayer, the closing prayer, and then she also has a meditation you can use in here at the beginning. So literally she has everything that you need in here to be able to open the records, essentially like one piece at a time, which is super cool. Okay, so from there we go into reading the Akashic records for others. And so if this is something that you're interested in, she also has a pathway prayer to open others' records and close others' records. And that, I think, again, super cool. And so then from there, she goes into different meditations you can do. And then the final part is using the Akashic records to heal yourself and others. And this is when she's actually giving different exercises that you can go through and do. And so she has different exercises where you can go through and actually access different levels of healing in the Akashic records, whether it be past lives, whether it be family lineage, whether it be relationships, whatever that looks like. She literally goes through how you bring that problem or that thing that you're struggling with to the records, to your master teachers and loved ones who are the ones guiding your experience in the records. And then she gives you prompts, questions, things you can use to ask about the cause and conditions. And then she gives you a path to be able to recognize the soul level truth. And so this looks like we have a surface level problem and we're like, oh yeah, this person gets on my nerves because I don't really like them. But maybe this person gets on your nerves because you guys have some sort of contract in this lifetime where you're supposed to be teaching each other unconditional love, and you can't learn or give unconditional love unless you're in a situation with somebody who prompts you to love them unconditionally. And so it just goes so deep into so many different ways of thinking, so many different things that we wouldn't have expected. She's also really good about, if you're gonna start doing readings, how to work with clients, how to understand things from their perspective, the flow of the reading. And then the last little bit she talks about is actually healing ancestral patterns in the records, which I think is so cool because the concept of like generational trauma is something that I'm like really actively working to like break a lot of different just things that like I feel like have been passed down in my family over generations that I'm like, nope, that ends here. And she literally breaks down how you can do that in the records as well as who your ancestors are. And then she basically gives you prompts as to how you can go in and kind of remove anything that's from maybe your ancestral line that might be holding you back, how to cleanse that, how to make sure it doesn't go to the next generation. Oh, so many cool things in here. Then she has a piece as well on past lives and going in, which is kind of similar to like ancestors. A lot of times your ancestors, you guys have had multiple lives together. And so she talks about really how to incorporate just all of these different things into one and how to use them while you are unpacking the Akashic records. So if you guys want to try this book, you can literally get it off Amazon. I got it delivered the next day. Super great read. I would definitely recommend. Tomorrow we'll get back into it with more Akashic records content and just a little bit more about what I'm learning as I'm spending time there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and as always, happy healing.